Today's episode, we're going to talk about the recent exhuming of Pauline Pusser, the wife of Sheriff Buford Pusser from the Walking Tall movies and fame in McNairy County, Tennessee. I am author Oakley Dean Baldwin, and I am a 34-year retired sworn law enforcement officer in the state of North Carolina. I have been professionally trained in criminal investigation techniques, and my son, Roy Dean Baldwin, is also a professionally trained law enforcement criminal investigator. He actually worked for a group called CCBI, which is the City County Bureau of Identification here in Raleigh, North Carolina. So he went from one crime scene to the next for several years. So his 20 years experience, he has a ton of investigative experience. He's also part of our group, the Baldwin Stories. We're going to talk today about our book, Murder of Mrs. Buford Pusser, which we released in 2021. Now, we also hope to cover different scenarios from the possible autopsy reports. One thing, we never did watch the original Walking Tall movies from back in the 70s. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, I believe, he did one called Walking Tall about a dozen years ago. Now, I think they used a different last name. I don't think he was Buford Pusser actually in that movie, but I didn't watch it, so I'm not exactly sure. And we came at this criminal investigation with open eyes. We weren't watching movies, Walking Tall movies, so we didn't have any perceptions of what to think about the movie itself. Now, being a distant cousin of Pauline Mullins, I was aware of this murder years ago, and it wasn't until about 2015, once my wife and I retired from work, that we started writing stories, the Baldwin Stories. If you go to any search engine and type in one word, the Baldwin Stories, all of our 27 books will come up. But we weren't thinking a whole lot about writing the stories at the time. We had 6 or 8 stories ahead of it that we were working pretty heavily on, and we did release those books. So it was about 2019 before we actually got into the deep woods of the investigation into Pauline's murder. So 2019, 2020, we had started digging really deep, interviewing family members. I talked to her sisters, nieces and nephews and cousins, and even a granddaughter of Pauline's. So many of the people that know about this story have already passed away, so I'm glad that I got to speak to the family members that I did. I think 3 or 4 of them actually have passed away since I interviewed them back in 2019 and 2020. Now, like I said, our book is called Murder of Mrs. Buford Pusser, and we talk about a lot of different evidence. We have other YouTubers are jumping on this story, and we notice a lot of copycat things. They repeat things that aren't true. They repeat things that happened in the movie from Hollywood that aren't even, they're not real, they never happened, but yet they repeat them as truth. So we're looking at it from the law enforcement side, and we're looking for, there's several things that are wrong, that these people are continually reporting wrong, and one is that Pauline's tombstone is marked 1934 as her birth date, and that's not correct. She was born February the 27th of 1931, which makes her 3 years older than what she was when she was murdered, which would make her 36 years old at the time of her murder. So we also noticed that they continually say that Pauline had 2 children from a previous marriage that Buford raised, and she had more. She actually had a 3rd child. Now, Buford did not raise that child, but she had 3 children by her first husband. So you have to really be careful of these, we used to call them Johnny-come-latelys, and they're jumping on the pile. They tell stories, they repeat stories, they watch different television shows that repeat the same stories. When all you got to do is look at the real evidence. So another qualification that I have is I retired as an intel officer with the United States Coast Guard Reserve, CWO4, which is a chief warrant officer. And I had many federal qualifications. One was pollution investigator. I was a facility safety and security inspector. I was a harbor inspector. I was a team boarding officer on a 41-foot law enforcement boat. So we had a lot of search and seizures. We worked drug interdiction and those type of things. About 4 months ago, I received a call from the TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, and I had the agent tell me that he had purchased my book, and I was a little surprised at that at the time. But he mentioned that he had some of the same concerns that I did in my book, and that they had reopened the cold case into Pauline's murder and asked for some additional information and additional questions, which it took me about a week to get the information that they needed. And I complied with their request, and I was happy to do so. And about a month ago, on February the 8th, many of you know that the TBI had Pauline's body exhumed from her grave in McNairy County. And we believe she's already started her autopsy. We're not for sure, but it has been a month. So we definitely want to look at the timelines that Pauline was reburied. Actually, it's been a month. They still apparently have her body, which could mean several different things. One, that it could possibly be that they're too busy right now and they haven't started it, or two, it could be an extensive autopsy where they're actually covering autopsy reports. And of course, I'm sure they're waiting for pathology reports. So you have the exhuming and the autopsy of Pauline, which tells me that the TBI has had reasonable suspicion to believe that something else happened at that crime scene. And a lot of the evidence that I looked at, I have a lot of suspicions about the stories that were continually changing, and then the evidence not matching the photographs that I saw, and some of the eyewitnesses had other things to say, and of course the family members had different things to say too. But one scenario that I want to talk about is if they find no additional cutting or defensive marks on Pauline's arms or hands. She wasn't shot with a smaller caliber weapon, and she doesn't have any broken bones because they were not involved in a motor vehicle accident. You wouldn't have too many people coming out of the woodworks, I don't think, with arguing too much. That there's a good possibility that Buford Pusser just got some of his facts wrong in the heat of the moment. Maybe he was embellishing some of his story. Being a former professional wrestler, that's what they did. And he was a politician, of course. He's trying to get votes. So we have a couple different scenarios. One is that first one, there's nothing but the one or two shots that she received to the skull which killed her, or that they have. Now another scenario would be that the TBI has other pertinent information in their file that would lead them to believe that Sheriff Buford Pusser may have been involved as an accessory, or possibly knew or set it up or knew of the actual ambush, that kind of thing. And then there's always the possibility that she was strangled, and that would show most of the time the bone in the throat would break from strangulation, that type of thing. And of course, if that was to happen, if she was shot with another smaller caliber weapon, or she was strangled, or she was injured, incapacitated before she was shot in the head, then there's no getting around that he would be responsible for that homicide. So be sure to like this video, be sure to subscribe, be sure to share it for us. This is going to be the first of many. We welcome you to the Baldwin Stories. We hope you have enjoyed this information, and we look to seeing you here real soon. Thank you very much.